Nonprofits.
I'm higher ed.
Higher ed. How many people here are from higher ed? Most of. Okay. I know nonprofit. How many people from nonprofits? Any other industry that we?
Government.
Media.
Government, media.
Hosting.
Hosting. Okay. Cool. Yeah, coming in. We were just getting kicked off. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So we are here to talk about the end of search. Now, for folks who are wondering, like, why are we specifically talking about this? Search is an integral part to digital experiences, especially for a lot of organizations in here, like nonprofits, higher education institutions, and search drives loyalty, trust, and retention for your organizations. So we want to talk about how the concept of search is being transformed with AI to help you be thinking, how do we prepare our digital experiences for this next wave of expectations of consumers as they come to our websites and seek out information. So a little bit about me. I am the co-founder of a company called Cohorted. We're a MarTech consultancy that uses AI tools and systems to help you acquire, retain, expand people, whether those be constituents, customers, students. I've been in tech for about 20 years. Started out in digital strategy, doing a lot of work in Drupal and web development, transitioned to doing product and growth in the enterprise. Had the opportunity to work with some of the biggest brands in the world and some of the largest Drupal websites that were ever launched. I'm here with my esteemed colleagues, Uri and Annalisa, who are my partners and longtime friends. And we are joined in spirit by Dennis, who's with one of our partners and co-developers of this presentation. He's with a company called Berkeley Data Science Group. They are an AI consultancy based out of Austin, Texas. All right, so show of hands, why do people think traditional search is dying? The answer is not AI.
We don't want to take an hour to do something that we can learn in 3 minutes.
Close, but it's not AI.
Fair. It's a personal need. True.
Okay.
It's been too commoditized. You can't trust it anymore because there's a lot of ads and people don't feel like it's genuine.
Very, very close. Very, very close. Any other guesses?
It's not accurate.
Very close as well. All derivative characteristics, but not like the main reason.
Too much advertising?
Another like characteristic, but not the reason. Okay, we'll just jump to it. Social, surprisingly. Yeah. So, trust in search has been dying for the past decade. You get irrelevant search results because the internet is growing so rapidly. It's this concept called the paradox of abundance. The more information you get, you think it'd be easier to find, but it actually gets harder to find. It's also getting increasingly complex. And because of ads, people aren't really clear on like what information is relevant and accurate and trustworthy versus what am I being promoted because it's really easy to game the system when you can pay to have your search results at the top of listing. Now, individuals have been turning to social media increasingly and us online communities to find information. If you look at the top 5 search engines right now by daily searches, 4 of those 5 are social media sites: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Reddit. Those 4 combined outpace Google today in terms of overall search volume. And there was a research study done by The Verge and Vox Media where they surveyed a few thousand consumers and found that 55% of them, primarily Gen Z, are turning to social media and online communities first to find information before going to keyword search engines. Now, why this is important when we're talking about like your own personal websites and digital experiences, those meta search trends have a huge impact on how people use search on your websites. Think about faceted search, right? When sites like Priceline and Booking.com started introducing faceted search, it quickly was adopted by individual business websites because that became the primary way people thought about and started to use search on the web. So consumers are starting to prefer conversational discovery, right? Which is the medium through which they find information through social media. It's much more intimate, it's much more accurate, it's much more relevant. And what generative AI and AI generally unlocking is the ability to simulate those conversations, right? I mean, the perks of using AI over social, you get a much higher hit rate, right? I'm sure everyone here has experienced posting a question on social media and then ghosted, right? Like nobody responds, or you don't get the actual answer that you need. So with AI, you get a much higher hit rate, much more accuracy, because there's a much broader set of information that AI will pull from to generate your response, and that experience can be much more personalized to you and your usage of that AI. What it also does, and which we're going to talk a lot about today, is generative AI allows you to understand intent of the user, which is super important for creating a great experience within search. So previously, search couldn't really understand what a user wanted, why a user wanted to search, right? You understood what they were interested in, but not the why behind it. With generative AI, you can start to unlock that by asking really deep questions. Like you can ask the why, you can ask probing questions, and you can go really deep on an individual topic, or if somebody's in more of an exploration mode, you can go really broad as well by expanding the information that you're presenting to the user. So we're going to talk about search in this kind of like virtuous loop, right? Where you're first trying to understand a user's intent, you're trying to validate that intent, you are then retrieving the information to present to the user in your search results, and then you're generating a response using generative AI. How many people here are using generative AI in your digital experiences or just personal lives? Okay. Would you rate yourself as, how many people would say you're a novice? Like very little experience, one. How many people would say you're like advanced, like you could build with AI? All right, how many people have built advanced like RAG applications? Okay. So like less than half, okay.
It's a RAG application.
We'll talk about that a little bit. RAG just means retrieval augmented generation. It's a way for you to give information to a large language model to help expand its knowledge of a topic or really focus its knowledge of a topic to then generate a response. Okay, so in understanding intent, there's two types of signals that we want to look for. There's contextual signals and conversational signals. Contextual signals are what is all the information we know about the user before they even enter a prompt, right? So like behavioral things, like have they used our application before? Are they a paid or free user? How long have they used the application? Things like that. Who are they individually? Do we have any demographic information? Do we know what their role is? What are their permissions and preferences? And then things like metadata. Like do we have information on like what department they're in? What program are they studying in? Things like that. Are they a matriculated student? And for conversational, that's what the user tells us, right? There's that initial prompt, which is what are they looking for? There's conversational classifiers, which are once that person gives us a prompt, we can ask them probing questions to better understand what their intent is, and then prompt refinement, which means they've given us information on what they need. We're going to generate a plan and give them back an understanding of what we think their intent is, so that they can validate it and we can move forward with actually generating a response. Now, this is a very kind of like lightweight framework of how you should think about using intent discovery to build AI-powered search. So the first things you want to understand are like, what are typically the types of intent people have when they come into your search experience? There's like auditing and compliance reasons, learning and onboarding, decision support. The one we're going to focus on today is exploration and research, which tends to be the most common. So I'll just kind of walk through this framework through that lens. So when people are doing research or exploring information, the level of ambiguity is really, really high. We know the general topic that they're looking for, but like that person may not even really understand what it is that they're seeking. They're looking for like a broad set of information. So the things that we want to think about, like how are we helping to discover what intent is, that discovery method is looking at behavioral data and user-provided signals. Behavioral data being like what have they searched for in the past, have they, what conversations have we had, and then the prompt that they've given us to generate their query. Next, we want to think about like what is our retrieval strategy? Now that we understand what their intent is, how are we actually getting back that information to present to the user? In this context, you want to think of something like semantic space mapping, which is basically just a concept of like how do you organize information and help the user understand connections between information in an organized space. And if people want to talk about that in more depth, we can talk about that maybe after a session because it gets a little technical. Then you want to think about like how are you routing that query. So when somebody enters a prompt, right? We talked about RAG as like a general framework, which is what powers a lot of like AI assistants that you use. So your retrieval route is like how are you actually going out and getting information? Historically, it's been keyword search, right? Or semantic search if you think about adding faceted search into that experience. In this context, you want to think of like hybrid search. How can you mix keyword search plus semantic search together to generate kind of a blended response for the user. Are people here generally familiar with the concept of hybrid search? Oh, one person? Is it helpful if I just kind of take a second to explain what that is? Okay, so are you guys familiar with like how search engines typically find information, the concept of vector search? A little bit, okay. So two types of search that kind of exist in the world. Keyword search, you enter a term or a phrase, and you go out and, using some search technology, extract from a database or data store all of the content that's relevant to that topic based off of some like lexicon matching, right? Pull back responses. With semantic search, you're not trying to find information by keyword. The information that might typically be saved in like a document or a web page is translated into what is a vector. It's like a numerical, mathematical representation of information. And then it takes your query and then takes the vector and it tries to determine what is the similarity between these two entities. And if there's a high degree of similarity, like a 90% match or 95% match, then it says we're going to use this information. Now there's positives and negatives to both of those, right? Keyword means like if you're looking for something specific, like the name of a company, you're going to find that in your content really well using keyword search. Semantic search may not find that information actually very well because it's trying to take the understanding of the term and find content that's similar based off of its general understanding of the term or language that you're using. It's not looking for exact word matching. So what you're doing with hybrid search, you're taking the exact keyword matching, you're taking the conceptual understanding of content, you now have two buckets of information, you're blending them together and saying, let's just shuffle these cards, right? And then applying some kind of mathematical ranking to that combined set of results to say these are the most relevant for the query that the person asked or submitted. Does that make sense? Okay, so you're combining very strict, accurate keyword searching with more contextual understanding to get much more relevant search results than you would get from either in isolation. So retrieval route, we would want to use some kind of hybrid search method with topical clustering. So can we organize this information by the topic, the various topics that we find within it, and then using a method called re-ranking, which means, okay, now we have that combined list of information that we prioritized and said, okay, of these 100 pieces of information, these 10 are the most accurate. Now let's just run it through another algorithm to determine, is this information actually relevant to the original query? It's like a second point of confirmation or validation. And then the way that you want to think of, then the next thing is you want to think about the output, right? Like how are you now taking this information that we retrieved and presenting it to the user on the front end, right? So the output is just like all the generative components of this. So in this case, we want to display for them the topics. We want to give them examples, right? Of like what, under category or topic A, here are examples of the information that we found. And then you want to give people a way of kind of exploring that information, like filters, visual experiences that help them search through all of that content that you presented in your response so they understand what it is. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions about this? No? Okay, and I can pull this back up when we get to Q&A just to dive deeper if there's anything that's confusing here. So we want to talk about this concept of like intent routing through the lens of like the user and what's happening in the system. I will probably just gloss over some of the technical pieces because I think some of this might just get a little too deep than we probably need, just given the level of like experience in the room. But I'll point out some key things that are happening inside of the architecture that are important for you to understand if you're building out some kind of like AI-powered search application. So, okay, we want to understand the user's intent. First thing, the user's accessing our application. So now we know this person's here. We know who they are. What's happening on the back end? We have like a profile on the individual that helps us understand like what their preferences are, what their intent might be, and we're updating that if we have any new information. And we're also reviewing their past chat history to be able to say, oh, this person has actually searched for something similarly in the past, or had another query that's somewhat related to this. Now we know generally directionally where this person is heading. They're trying to research like grad programs in data science, right? The next phase we talked about in that virtuous loop is validating intent, right? Now we know what the intent is. The next is validating intent. So the user's providing us additional context, right? They're giving us their prompt, they're answering questions so we understand what their intent is, and then they're approving next steps. We're giving them a plan. we're saying, okay, we understand what you're looking for. Here's our plan for how we want to go and get that information. And they're approving that to say, okay, you're on the right path. What's happening on the back end, we have AI agents that are taking their prompt through like a conversational agent. We're passing it to a planning agent that's actually saying, okay, now that we understand what this is, let me go out and actually develop a step-by-step plan for how I'm going to retrieve that information for you. And then we're in that process, the conversational and planning agents are probably talking to each other as you're getting clarifying information from the user. Right. The next step is, okay, now that we know what the intent is and we validated that intent, how do we go out and retrieve information that we can use to generate a response for the user? So the user is just waiting patiently, right? They're watching all of the magic happen in that AI chat assistant. What we're doing is we're executing on that hybrid search that I described, right? I kind of jumped the gun and explained this component of it. But what's happening is we are retrieving information from a search index, which is for our keyword search, our vector database, which is for our semantic search. We're blending those together using some kind of algorithm, and then generating a score, right? That's being performed by the retrieval agent. We're then re-ranking, which is providing that second layer of validation that these pieces of information are relevant to the person's query using a re-ranking model. And then we're passing that information back to our front end to present to the user. Does that make sense? Any questions on? Yep. Go ahead.
Is the re-ranker also using machine learning, or is it more of a deterministic algorithm?
You can use both. I have seen more common lately is people are using small language models. Like BGE is a really popular one. I've heard some people using BM25 even, which is weird because that's a common algorithm used in like text search. But there's a lot of different models. You can sometimes use even large language models, but I wouldn't recommend it. I haven't found them to be super accurate in that case. You typically want to use a small language model because you can fine tune it on the specific context and topic that people are looking for information on. Okay, so now that we've retrieved the information, we know what are the search results that somebody has. The next is you want to generate a response. Now this is where the magic happens. We pass that re-ranked information to an LLM, right? Which is, are you guys familiar with like system and context prompts and how those kind of help to craft? Yeah, okay. So basically what you're doing is taking the information that you've retrieved from your backend, you're giving it to a large language model as a system prompt, or part of your context prompt, sorry. Part of your context prompt, you might actually include information on the user in your system prompt. And then that is being used to generate the response, the search response for the user. So we have this cycle of, again, the system is updating information on what it knows about the user the second they come into the application, reviewing the chat history so you have context to what their intent might be and their past behaviors. It's then taking their input or their request, developing a plan for how to respond, and then asking follow-up questions to refine that plan to make sure that it's super accurate. It's then asking the user to approve what the plan is so it can perform that query. It's then going out and performing some kind of hybrid search query to then retrieve information, and then passing that to an LLM to generate a response. Okay, so a couple things that you should keep in mind, like this model is great, but there is risk involved in terms of like the accuracy of responses. So a couple ways that you can mitigate that risk and build in governance. Those user validation checkpoints. As you develop your plan, before you present people with a response, you ask them, is this accurate or is this not, right? Put it in the hands of the user. Using re-rankers, again, as that second point of validation, that the information that you retrieved is actually accurate to the person's query. Using safe fallbacks, which means if you don't have the information to answer the person's question, you can say, hey, sorry, we don't have information, but do you want to do one of these three things that might be relevant to what you care about? And then keeping an audit log, like keep a log of the conversation, the context, like all the information that was pulled to generate the response. So you can go back and do audits of whether your system is hallucinating or whether it's actually providing accurate responses. So how to get started? Super complex, probably went a couple levels deeper than some people might be familiar with. But to get started, we generally want to recommend start bare bones. This is like an ideal scenario, right? Like as you're building out your AI search system, where you probably want to be after a couple years. To start, though, you want to start with like a really basic RAG system. Corrective RAG is an approach which basically just means what we talked about with the re-ranking, like you generate a response for the user, you have a secondary large language model or small language model that looks at the response that was generated, and it validates that all of the information or documents that were cited are actually, like the citations are accurate. Like the information in the response is actually found in the documents that you use to generate the response. We recommend using hosted language models. Don't try and host like an open source model yourself. It's super complicated, it's gonna be expensive. Use something that's like hosted on Hugging Face, use an OpenAI API. Use off-the-shelf RAG systems. If you go to like IBM, AWS, any of these large cloud providers, they offer plug-and-play tools for building RAG systems out of the box. You can start to build custom stuff later down the line if it's needed. We think you can do a lot of prototyping using automation tools. Use like N8N to build agents as prototypes before you go into building them in custom code. And then lastly, if you want to start experimenting with personalization, you can get really complex and build custom vectors that have like all this information about your individual users. But you can start with generating like a really simple text profile as like a markdown file that has like a description of who the user is that you then pass to your LLM as context, rather than having to build out something that's super complicated using like CDPs and things like that, at least out of the gate. That's it. We went a little bit longer because I provided some like deeper explanation on things, but with the couple minutes we have left, questions? Yes.
What does RAG stand for again?
Retrieval Augmented Generation.
Could I
Yeah.
elaborate on that one? Because
Sure.
I just learned about this recently too. So if I ask ChatGPT, like, take this block of text and rewrite it in the style of Emily Dickinson, right? It's going to look at a large language model. It's got all of this language, so it's going to look at everything that it already has all internally, and it's going to make statistical judgments and return something where it's giving me back text, but it's all self-contained. RAG it's actually going out and retrieving something, and ChatGPT will actually tell you, like, I'm searching the web, right? So if I ask it, like, what's the best running shoe for me on a trail, it's going to go out, search, pull that information, retrieve that information, pull it back in, and then present it in natural language.
Exactly.
So that's the difference between the two.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
What are some of like the best tools that you found for like creating even like small language learning models?
For creating small language models?
Yeah, or creating a language learning models.
I would not recommend creating your own language models. That's actually really expensive. People would use something like PyTorch or something like that, some open source technology. But if you want to like find an existing small language model to use that you want to fine tune, I would go on Hugging Face. Like they actually have evaluations of large language models and small language models that you can look at. They grade them regularly. There's new versions of them coming out seemingly twice a day. So yeah, I would start there.
Are they geared towards like different like finance or marketing?
There are, yeah. There's existing models that are trained on very specific domains, like even like higher education and terminology used in those industries. So you can oftentimes find an existing language model. I would say though, especially for some of the folks in the room who, like, if you're kind of like newer into generative AI and building these types of systems, I would just rely on large language models to start and look at fine-tuning those. And then later down the line, when you get into doing more advanced, like RAG applications, AI agent-based systems, then you can start tuning small language models. Because those are going to be, like, think of it this way, what differentiates a large language model from a small language model is how much information it's been trained on. You don't want to go use a small language model that has a limited amount of training data when you don't really know the type of topics that people are going to be searching for. So you're sometimes better off using a large language model that has a pretty broad understanding of the world. And then you can start to tailor as you get a better understanding of your users. Why don't we go to you and then you? Sorry.
Yeah, what advice would you give to a client that is maybe like a small, medium-sized like website that wants conversational-based search, who's currently using like hybrid, like Elasticsearch and keyword search? They want something a little more hands-on than what we're getting.
Yeah, even for like medium-sized sites, if you are like, what's the site built in?
What's that?
What's the site built in?
This would be a WordPress site.
Okay, so like MySQL backend.
But
Yeah.
we're using like Elasticsearch, and we're like outsourcing the search to.
So Elasticsearch actually, and companies like Elasticsearch, they offer hybrid search capabilities. So you can actually just leverage their existing backend capabilities, and then all you have to worry about is a lot of the front end for the chat assistant type UI. And even for that, you can go to companies like IBM has an out of the box like conversational AI plugin that you can use with like different search backends for like RAG. So I would probably start there and just say like leverage what you already have in Elasticsearch, because their technology ecosystem is just going to work really well together.
So the ES can like leverage like a small language model that would.
No, so you would need to connect it to like OpenAI, because like what the large language model is doing in that context, it's not retrieving the information, it's taking the information you're retrieving from Elasticsearch, both from their like vector search and keyword search, and then using it as context. So you still need OpenAI or something on the front end.
I see.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
And you had a question.
Just, yeah, so for that entire amazing flowchart that you had put up
This
there,
one? Yeah.
how do you go about like just even identifying what would be a good use case for this? Because I know that a lot of organizations, that seems like something that you would have if you're like a huge organization with like lots of people. And that
Not actually. So this, how big is your organization?
I work with an agency that works with many organizations, so that
Oh, you're on the agency side. Got it. Yeah, yeah.
a small startup.
This actually, I would say, yeah, if once you're getting into like building an agentic search, maybe a little bit more on the complicated side, strip the agents out, and this is actually a very common architecture. Like for powering small sites. So I would say, yeah, if you just strip out probably like the profile embedding, or you can actually even leave that in there, strip out the agents, you can still build a really like powerful hybrid search application using even open source technology like
This
PG.
is for search.
This is for search, yeah. Yeah.
But search in the sense of like someone's come to your website and they want to take an action, or they just want to find information.
What do you define like take an action?
I want to reschedule my plane ticket, I guess is a recent one that I had.
It's the same mechanic. Like if they want to reschedule, like the whole rescheduling component, that's going to be like business logic, right? That you're putting in the user form. That's like forms and things like that. All of the information to be able to like find the actual flight that's right for the user, and then give them like a description of the flights and all of that. That can all be powered by this.
And I would just add to that a use case that I think this could work for small and medium-sized businesses. And to give you an example, I work with a lot of legal software. Often you log into that software and there's an AI chatbot. This may be a small software company, maybe they only have like 5 employees, but you're still following this process because I'm asking a question like, how do I do this? I couldn't find it in the documentation. Why is this not working? And it's doing this behind the scenes. It's going into this knowledge base, querying it. It's looking at who am I, what instance am I using, what questions have I asked in the past, and then giving me contextual answers, or routing me to a person when it runs out of answers, right? But even in a small business, I think there's still, I know it seems like maybe overcomplicating it, but that can still happen behind the scenes, and I think there's still use cases for that type of search specific to that company and what they're doing.
Thank you.
Question?
We're going to slowly be
Wrapping up.
time,
Okay,
so
we'll do two quick questions. Okay.
2 minutes, not more.
I just wanted to ask if you would consider like the chatbot on Lowe's
Mhm.
or Rufus on Amazon, if you would categorize it as this type of
Absolutely. Yep.
and other examples you have of some that you think are working well.
Man, a lot of the I honestly can't say I've found a lot on websites that work really well. Like Perplexity AI, I think is one of the best ones. I think if you look to the AI, the like big AI agents and how they operate, and I think they're doing it really well. There are some like smaller niche AI assistants that work really well, but I think those are still by far the best that I've seen. Yeah. And what was it? Somebody else had their hand up.
I had a
Yeah.
question. Would you recommend replacing the standard search experience with something like that for regular websites? Because
No, we didn't.
It is an issue, right?
We didn't necessarily get into front end.
Yeah.
You don't need to necessarily have an AI assistant for this to work. You can still present things like traditional search results if you wanted to, but what you're doing on the back end, I mean, you're limiting the user a little bit, right? In terms of like how valuable the presentation is, but all of this can still power traditional search. Okay. Thank you all. If anyone wants to hang back, ask questions, we will stick around. Yeah.